Hello, YouTube, and welcome back. I just started an iOS series, but it just seems like there is so much curiosity about BLoC and a need for more practical examples of how you can implement the BLoC pattern in your application. So we're going to circle back and actually start a project in BLoC today. It's going to be a contact app, nothing fancy, but just a list of contacts, the ability to pull up a contact in detail. We're going to use an HTTP endpoint to get the data. We're going to put it in our BLoC, and then we're going to pull it out as needed. I'd like to keep these segments to about 20 minutes in length, so I anticipate we'll need 2 segments to get the basic application set up. It will set up the BLoC, we'll load the BLoC, we'll fetch the data, we'll model the data, and we'll display it on the screen. Do a couple more segments after that, which are totally optional. The third one, as I map this in my mind, I anticipate we'll do a deeper dive on the BLoC. We'll split out some elements that might be helpful to remove from the BLoC if you would plan on a larger application. There's some nested data in the HTTP that we're going to pull. We're going to ignore that in the first 2 segments, but in the third, we can circle back, show you how to model that, and include it in your application, which is a helpful use case. And then the fourth, just to be a perfectionist, we'll come back and actually make the view look good. We'll make it look like an app. We'll style up a card and all that. And so that's the rough plan. That's enough gab. This is assuming that you have Flutter installed and are ready to go. You shouldn't need anything other than that. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so opening up a terminal here, we're going to type Flutter create BLoC contact tutorial. That's what I'll call it. We'll give that a second, and then I'll go ahead and open it in Visual Studio Code. All right, so we're going to do some cleanup here. So we'll come into the main.dart file, and we're just going to start clearing some of this out. So the first thing I'm going to take out is this comment below the theme data, and then I'm going to take everything below the build method. So starting with class my homepage, I'm going to delete everything there from there to the bottom of the screen. So we're just going to start from scratch. So in the lib folder, we're going to add a source folder, src. And inside of src, we're going to add another folder called screens. And that's going to hold the widgets that are full screen. And so we are going to have a home.dart screen, and we will have a contact.dart screen. So that will give us a page to put our list view on, the home page, and then the contact would be a detail of the contacts we're going to build. So for home, we're going to go ahead and build a stateful widget. We built stateless in the past BLoC tutorials. We're going to build a stateful here because we want this to be able to go out and fetch its data when it is initiated. So we're going to set it up a little differently this time. So we can create first of all, we're going to import Flutter, import package, material.dart. 2 T's in Flutter, and no T at the end. There we go. All right. We'll create class homepage, and that is going to extend a stateful widget. We'll come down below that and build our state class. extend state type of home page. And I'll go ahead and add our build method. So we'll just go ahead and let the code complete do that. That's our required method. And then up here we need to actually create the state, so we will do that. And that is going to go to our home page state. All right, and as a placeholder, let's just put something on the screen that lets us know that we are on that page. So we'll build a scaffold, we'll give it a body property, and in that body we will give it a center. That center will have a child, and that child will be a text widget that just simply says home. And add a semicolon at the end there. That should be all set. So now we can come back and take care of the error we have in main.dart because we've had this my home page and we got rid of that. So we will just take out that entire line and just put home page. And we'll need to import it. So I'll use the auto import, or else you can come up here and import the home screen right up there. So since we've resolved our errors, I'm going to go ahead and start the debugger. And while that goes, let's go back to our contact and let's just do the basic setup there so we've got something on the screen. So this is going to be a stateless widget. We can go ahead and import package Flutter material.dart. Our class is going to be a contact page. And we're extending a stateless widget, and we need a build method to make it happy. And we are going to do the same thing we did back in home page. In fact, I'm going to go back to the home page. I am just going to copy this scaffold. I'm going to paste it into contact, and I'm going to change home to contact. So that just gives us something to look at on the screen. All right, so there's enough of a presentation logic that at least we've unbroken it and it gives us something on the screen. So let's go ahead and shift to the data and the back end on this. So where we're going to get this data is we're going to go to a service called JSON placeholder, which if you're not familiar with is just a fake API for developers to test with. And it's you can probably get there through Google, but the actual address is jsonplaceholder.typicode, typicode.com. And they have, again, if you've never been here, a few different resources that you can use. You can actually post to this, and you can do put request. It's pretty neat, but we're just going to do a get request. And we're going to use the user data and treat it as if it's a contact data. So if you go ahead and click on users down here under resources, you get this JSON back. We are going to take the, for starters, the ID, the name, the username, and the email. So we're just going to create a model to accept those for and create an object for us. So let's start by creating a model that will be able to receive these this JSON, put it into a Dart object that we can work with. So under the SRC folder, I'm going to add a new folder, and we're going to call it models. Oops. And inside of models, we're going to create a new file, and we're going to call it contact.dart. And it's going to be a class of contact. Up at the top, we're going to declare the variables that we want to be a part of that model. We're going to have an integer of ID. I know this because I look here at the data, and there's no quotations around it, so that's an ID, or an integer. We're going to have a string of name. We're going to have another string of username and another string of email. Okay. So we need to create a constructor for those. So we will create a contact constructor. And in this, we can add positional or named arguments. Positional, we can start typing with named. We put a bracket here. And inside the bracket, you can say this dot your property, hit a comma, and it's taken care of. So this is just a common use case in Dart, obviously building models, so you don't have to name each property. You can just do this dot, and so we will do and this dot email, and that will take care of the constructor. Now we also want a function, because we're going to be getting this in JSON. We want a way to say this is how you're going to take the JSON and convert it into our Dart model. And so we're going to build a method down here called from JSON, and we're going to pass it a map of string and dynamic. So string keys, dynamic data, and then we're going to map each one of the properties in our input JSON to our object. So we need the ID field, and we're going to map that to our parsed JSON, which we're passing in a map. And then that should be brackets ID. So this part here, this string, conforms to the field name, the key in the JSON. So you don't actually have to name your properties the same as is in the JSON. This is an opportunity to change those if you want to, but this is where down here where you say this JSON key is going to map to this property. We're just going to keep them the same. All right, we're going to do the same for name, and it's a comma after each one. And we'll do the same for email. And at the end, we'll semicolon it. Okay, so that's our model. That gives us the ability to take that JSON in, to map it to our properties, and convert it into a Dart object. So now that we have our model, we can start to think about our block, because we want to start with a model because we're going to be referencing that model in the block, so it makes sense to start there. So let's construct our block. So in our SRC, we're going to create another folder, and we're going to call that folder blocks. And inside of blocks, we're going to put two files. It's going to be contact_provider.dart. And it's going to be contact_block.dart. And let's just set up the block with just a class decorations for now. So it'll be a class of contacts block. And that's all for now. And then in our contact provider, it's going to be a class of contacts provider, and that is going to extend an inherited widget. And for some of the hows and whys of this, I'm going to refer you to my first video on blocks. I don't want to dwell too much on this. We want to just take a use case and extend it. So inside here, we're going to have a contacts block that we will declare. It'll be a final. That'll be what we export. And this is always the same for the most part, except for the variables in a provider. We have our key. We have our child widget. We set our block equal to the contacts block. Key, child. All right, we need our required method, which is update should notify underscore inside the parentheses, and that will go to true. And then we have static contacts block of build context context, and we return context dot, this old long one inherited from widget of exact type, and that is a context provider. And remember, Dart cannot infer that, so we need to let it know that it is a context provider. And then we slap dot block on the end there. Context provider, right there. And that is spelled wrong, context provider. There we go. So we have imported our block. We do also want to export our block, so let's go ahead and do that. Export contact.block. There we go. I'm just going to do this the same. This was auto-generated, but we're going to keep it consistent. So we want to import our block. We want to export our block so that when we import our provider in our widgets, we don't have to then turn around and import the block every time. We'll get both with that. So this is just the basic setup for a provider. Again, I'd refer you to my first video on BLoC for the basics on that. That's our setup for the provider. So then let's flip over here to our block. All right, we got our class. We want our variable, which is we are going to want a list of contacts. So we're going to get this JSON. We're going to convert it into a list of contacts. We're going to display it in a list view, and then we'll have a detail view. So let's do contacts here. And we need to have a behavioral context, or behavioral subject, so we need to import RxDart for that. All right, so we'll go to installing. We will pull RxDart, and we will put that in our pubspec.yaml file right. I got it right there. I'm having a hard time with it. Right below the Cupertino icons in the dependency section. Save it. That will import it, and then we can come back here. And we should have, I don't think it'll, yeah, it will. All right, so we can use behavioral subject. That will import RxDart up here at the top. In fact, I'm going to get rid of that, and we're just going to import. Package RxDart. There we go. All right, it's a behavioral subject, and the behavioral subject is going to be of type list contact, and we're going to auto import our contact from our models here. And we need 2 closing brackets, so make sure you get that right, and then an instantiator right there. All right. So we're going to give ourselves a behavioral subject of list contacts, so we're going to get that list of contacts from our JSON, convert it into our Dart object, and store it in our block for reference later on. We have opened up a stream, so we do need to close that. So let's go ahead and create a dispose method and contacts.close. That will get rid of our blue warning here. And then we want to go ahead and get the data and set the data. So let's start with getting. We are going to get that from a stream. It's going to be a list of type contacts. So remember, this behavior subject is really just a stream. You can think of them interchangeably. And we're going to do a getter. We'll call that contacts. And that getter will get the stream from our contacts property. So once we have our stream loaded up, we'll be able to pull the contacts out of it by referencing contacts from our widget. We want to set the data. And, whoop, not that. We want a function, so we can set the data. And we're going to pass it a list of type contact. And we'll give it another getter, and that getter will be called change contacts. And that will give us a handle to go ahead and add contacts to our sync. All right, so we can get our data from the stream. Once we have our front end, we're going to be able to put information. We'll be able to put a list of contacts in there, and then we can dispose of our block. So why don't we go ahead and wrap it up here? We're hitting about 20 minutes. So next time we will come back. We will hit the HTTP endpoint. We will convert that with our model into a Dart object or a list of Dart objects, put that into our block, and start to work with it. So hopefully you found this helpful. Please like and subscribe if you did, and we hope to see you in part 2.